Hi, my name's Eric, welcome back to my channel. Let's talk again about Kate Bush. Today, as you requested, I'm going to react to her 1982 album, The Dreaming, and break down the album's lyrics. Before I dive in, let me know in the comments down below what Kate Bush album I should react to next. Check the description box for a link to a list of nonprofits you can donate to. Please subscribe to be here when I post new videos, and hit the bell icon to be notified when my videos go live. The only Kate Bush album that I've heard so far in full is Hounds of Love, and as you might know from my reaction to it, I absolutely love it, so I'm so excited to listen to this album for the very first time. Track number 1 is Sat in Your Lap. Ooh, weird time signature.
I see the people working and see it working for them. Succeeding, knowledge is something such a big deal. Succeeding, knowledge is something that you never hold. 'Cause when I am unhappy, there's nothing that can move me. Succeeding, knowledge is something that you never hold. Succeeding, heaven is hell.
Ooh.
Succeeding, hell is heaven. I understand just when I think I'm crazy. Just when I think I'm crazy. I've been doing it for years. My goal is moving near. Succeeding, knowledge is I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a scholar. But I really can't be bothered with just getting I must admit, just when I think I'm crazy, I got the break, hang on, take it off. I want the answers quickly, but I don't have the energy.
Relatable.
Some gray and white and matter. I'm coming up the ladder.
Okay. Off to a weird start. That was definitely less accessible of an opener than Running Up That Hill. That's for sure. The time signatures are pretty wonky. I think there were multiple time signatures in the song as well, so it's kind of hard to get a groove in a traditional 4/4 pop song sort of sense. That said, the sort of chaos of the song I think works perfectly with its concept, which I think is epistemology. There are basically two emotional storylines going on here that intersect, one about knowledge and one about conformity. On those really cool sort of slinky verses, Kate talks about watching all these other people work and perform happiness, and she realizes that their sort of traditional prescribed way of life just isn't for her. So since she's not on that set path that makes life make sense for so many people, she wonders when life will start to make sense to her. So the chorus goes, some say that knowledge is something that you never have, some say that knowledge is something sat down in your lap, some say that heaven is hell, some say that hell is heaven. And the sense that I get is, people fundamentally disagree about what truth and knowledge are, so really there are no answers. So with these different perspectives, you can choose to be pessimistic and give up on your pursuit of knowledge, or be optimistic and trust that the answers will come someday. But Kate hasn't settled on just one perspective. She still desperately wants knowledge. She says, just give it quick, gimme it, but she still feels like it's out of reach. So I imagine that the rest of the album is going to be sort of a journey of Kate looking for answers and trying to see where exactly she fits in the world. Track number 2 is There Goes a Tenor, and here goes a soprano.
Okay, remember. Okay, remember.
It's like a northern accent.
To get into it and get out, the sense of adventure is changing to danger. My excitement turns into fright. Uh-oh, uh-oh, my words speak. What am I gonna say? Right here. We got the job sized. It's shop for business. I'm having dreams
love the different vocal approaches she's taking.
You dug the safe up, and all I know is I wake up covered in rubble. When you would carry me, all kids floating in the breeze. Oh, there goes the tenor. Remember them? That's when we used to vote for him.
Okay. Wow. Oh, I was so engrossed in the story of that song. I love that sort of oompa oompa beat going on. Definitely sort of easier to get a groove on this one, even with the sort of interruptions in the beat that I thought worked really well to sort of set this tone of her increasing anxiety and then moments of calm. That was so cool. And then that little sort of political coda at the end, I think. We have a character who is desperate for money and then who brings up voting. So I think there's an undercurrent of political themes going on here that maybe she'll expand on later. And so in the story of the song, Kate has chosen a life of crime. I guess music didn't work out for her in this parallel universe, and she and her partners are getting ready to rob a business. She talks about blowing up a safe, so she's probably robbing a bank. And at the end of the song, the title comes in when she is lying on the ground post-explosion looking at the sky above her and sees these bills floating by. On a basic level, the song is about a get-rich-quick scheme that goes wrong, but more generally, it's about Kate wanting something urgently and it not going right for her. She says, we'll have this money in half an hour, sort of the same sense of urgency that she had on the opener with respect to knowledge. So now on 2 songs in a row, we have these lessons about the dangers of impatience, whether it be impatience for knowledge or impatience for money. And something else that's interesting is that on the second verse, Kate mentioned that she's been having premonitory dreams about this scheme going wrong, which is ultimately what happens. So I think this is tying in the title. So there's something to this about the relationship between dreams and instincts and the truth, but it's all still coming to the surface. So maybe she'll expand on that more on track number 3, Pull Out the Pin.
Just as we hit the groove at the moment, so happy to be alive. You learn to ride the earth when you're living on your belly and the enemy is city birth. And then the Yankee hash with my silver bullet and my silver bullet.
Oh, that's ominous.
Just one thing, be your hero.
Wow.
He's big and pink and not like me. He sees no light. He sees no reason for the fight. I look in American eyes. I see little life. I see little wife. Just one thing, your
Sounds like a helicopter. Wow. Wow, that like insistent crying is so powerful. Wow. Considering the subject matter, the sound of the song wasn't particularly intense, but I think she does a really great job of building atmosphere with the production because the instruments, some of which actually carried over to Hounds of Love, feel very organic and then they're interrupted by the sounds of these choppers. And when she talks about the enemy being so different from her, we hear the sound of like a train or a bus passing through, almost like it's crashing through the peaceful sound of this music. Though, of course, the story of this song, again, is not peaceful because between her talking about the enemy being an American, her Buddha, and these rural towns, I'm imagining that this is from the perspective of a Vietnamese soldier during the Vietnam War. And that war would have ended just a few years before this album came out. I love that repeated line about the silver Buddha and the silver bullet. Buddha, of course, is a religious symbol, but the silver bullet can have multiple meanings. In folk tales, a silver bullet is what's used to kill a werewolf, and in like westerns, a silver bullet is almost like a magical weapon. They are just sort of supernaturally precise and used by, I guess, outlaws to defeat their enemies. So these images tell us that this character feels that their fight is basically heaven ordained, like they are fighting against this supernatural being, or just they're basically a force for good where there is evil. And when a lot of the reporting in the US for sure, but also I would imagine the UK, would have glorified the American side, this song does the opposite. And calling back to the explosion from the last song, this character on the chorus gets ready to pull the pin out of this grenade and set it off, and defiantly yells, "I love life." And Kate also says throughout the song that her character has a reason to fight, whereas the American soldier opposite from them does not. So the way that the song expands on the last two is that we have a character who finds meaning specifically through a life or death struggle, as opposed to generalized curiosity or money hunger. But still, this narrator spends a lot of time focusing on the perspective of the American who they are fighting against, so there's still this idea of what truth can come out from these differing perspectives. Or really, it just might be telling us how subjective these points of view are, and saying, again, contrary to Kate's wishes, that there is no truth. Alright, track number 4 is Suspended in Gaffa.
Out in the garden is half of heaven, and we're only bluffing. We're not ones for busting. Unless we can prove that we're doing it, we can't have it all. We can't have it all. Only my feet are feet apart. It all goes slow. The night suspended in heaven until I'm ready for you. Until I'm ready for you. Keep trying to get nearer, but as it gets clearer, there's something appears in the way that's a blanking an eye with a candle is trying to get through a distract, but sometimes it's hard to know if I'm doing it right. Can I have it all now? Can I have it all now? Only my feet are feet apart. It all goes slow. I don't know why I'm crying. That girl in the mirror between you and me, she don't stand a chance of getting anywhere.
Interesting.
She can't have it all. Suspended in heaven until I'm ready for you. Until I'm ready for you. Until I'm ready for you. Can I have it all now?
Okay, another Oompa Pa song. Love that. It sort of had the feeling on the chorus of like a carousel organ, which I also love. And it's really becoming more and more apparent just how many of the artists that I listen to that this album, or just Kate in general, has influenced, like Tori Amos and Marina. The song is my first time hearing the word wangle, so I'm gonna have to put that one in my pocket. Also, I just had to look up what Gaffa was, and it's Gaffer's tape. I guess that's a British thing, or just a Kate Bush thing. There's this image that I love on the last verse where Kate says that she is that girl in the mirror between you and me, you being, I think, like God or the divine, or again, some truth that she's trying to access. She talks about catching a glimpse of God and wondering where the angels are, and so she's trying to look for it and sees herself in between. She is the thing blocking her own view of that divine truth. This took me a second to picture, but I think what she's getting at is she is somehow getting in the way of her own pursuit of the truth, or even more specifically, maybe her own sense of self is obscuring her view of the truth. I'm pretty sure in the song she's working on a construction site, and the house that she is working on building is trapping her. She talks about being in these long hallways and, you know, caught in gaffer's tape and having these planks blocking her. But towards the beginning of the song, she says, "They've told us unless we can prove that we're doing it, we can't have it all." And I think, like the opener, that refers to work, like the labor of building this house. So on Sat in Your Lap, Kate was insecure because she thought that people working conventional 9 to 5 jobs had all the answers, but now she's in their shoes as a construction worker and finds it all to be a trap and a lie and a distraction from this divine truth, whatever that truth may be. Track number 5 is Leave It Open. Oh, the sound design is so eerie. Yes. Wow, that was really odd and a banger. I like the distortion in the song because it actually works really well with the theme of the song, which is about suppression. So the fact that it's a little bit hard to discern what she's saying and it feels almost like she's underwater or obscured by something fits perfectly. It's also sort of counterintuitive in some ways because even though there's all that sound obscuring the lyrics, and the lyrics are the vaguest so far because they're mostly just metaphors and abstractions, it also has the clearest message so far about individuality. The song is split into halves, the first being sort of eerie and sullen, and the second half picking up and sounding more like a rock song, and the message of the song changes too, being first about the past and then about the present and future. In the lyrics, Kate tells us that in the past, she had a tendency to shut herself up. She was insecure about the way that she spoke. She was afraid to be vulnerable. She sort of had to smooth over her eccentricities. But now she's learning to leave it open, to open herself up and be more honest. Which is why at the end of the song, she says, "We let the weirdness in." Basically, she's ready to embrace her quirks and express herself. And then on the chorus, she says, "Harm is in us, but power to arm." It's not totally grammatical, so it's hard to pin down just one meaning, but the vibe I'm getting is that she's saying, there's this cycle of harm. We have the capacity to harm and to be harmed, but we can interrupt that cycle by being ourselves. So I think this is a direct answer to the opener and sort of an affirmation of not only Kate as a person, but also her art, which is very evidently unique. Track number 6 is the title track, The Dreaming.
Mistaken for a tree till you're near him on another way, the tree begin to breathe. It's my dented banner. The silver lies keep alive the territorial war. In the morning, with no warning. And he's mistaken for a tree. Goes another kangaroo on the
Okay.
bonnet on the van.
First of all, sound design wise, this has a very similar dynamic to Pull Out the Pin because we have these sort of nature sounds and this low thrumming of the didgeridoo, and then it's constantly interrupted by these car sounds. And I think at the end of the song is the sound of logging, like it sounded like trees falling over onto each other, which makes sense because Kate says that Aboriginals are mistaken for trees. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because let's start with the first verse, where it is established that this song takes place in Australia, because Kate is putting on this Australian accent, and she talks about a kangaroo being hit by a car. So again, it opens with a bang, quite literally, just like the explosions on Pull Out the Pin and There Goes a Tenor. And we have this car interrupting the natural serenity of this environment, again, just like that bus sound on Pull Out the Pin. And then in the next line, Kate talks about Aboriginals, Indigenous Australians, being mistaken for trees. So we've got this opposition between Native and Indigenous Australia and colonial and industrial Australia. Because basically a Native Australian is objectified, is seen as a tree, which is a natural object, and then later in the song we hear the trees being cut down. Just like the poor kangaroo being hit by the car. And this is made even more explicit in the second verse when Kate says, "The civilized keep alive the territorial war, erase the race that claim the place and say we dig for ore." So just like Pull Out the Pin, this is another perspective that Kate and I guess other British people would not have been exposed to, and even further would have been seen as being in opposition to. So again, Kate is asking, what is the truth, and can there really be just a truth when there are so many starkly different perspectives and belief systems? Track number 7 is Night of the Swallow.
The night doesn't like it. Looks just like your face on the moon to me. It's funny how even now you're laughing. If you go, I'll let the Lord know, and they'll head you off when you touch the ground. It's funny how even now you're miles away. I'll just
The percussion's really interesting. Ooh.
Can't you swallow for all of the guilty to let them free? Behold the sky on the other side of borderline. Let you do was a higher plane and no names mentioned. Tonight's the night of the flight. Before we know, we'll be over the doors. Like a solo, if they go with a higher plane and no names mentioned. If they go with a higher plane and no names mentioned. If they go.
Nice. That was really climactic. I love the ebbing and flowing of energy, just like on There Goes a Tenor, and it makes sense that it sort of recalls the structure of that song because it's about a similar situation just from a different perspective. There Goes a Tenor was about Kate getting ready to go rob a bank, something like that, and this song is about her being in love with a criminal who's getting ready to go pull off some heist, and she just does not approve of it. And she's serious about it. She says on the second verse, "If you go, I'll let the law know, and they'll head you off when you touch the ground. Ooh, please don't go through with this. I don't like the sound of it. It's funny how even now you're miles away." Basically, this person's ambitions are pulling them away from Kate, and she's desperate to keep them close to her. I also like the use of flight in this song because literally this heist or whatever requires a plane, but also symbolically flight represents escape and also freedom. After seeing the effects of lofty ambitions on There Goes a Tenor, Kate is now sort of wary of them. She wants to keep this flight and her lover grounded. This also feels like a reversal of Leave It Open because Kate wants to tamp this person's ambitions and bring them back down to earth, which is why she ends the song by saying, "You're not a swallow. You weren't meant to fly." Track number 8 is All the Love.
First time I died was in the arms of good friends of mine. They have been near me for years. Say, why do it now when I'm on the run? I'm going out. We wait for you. I didn't wanna let them see me weak. I didn't wanna let them see me weak. I needed you to love me too. All the love, all the love, all the love you should have given. The next time I dedicate my life's plan to the friends I make. So now when they ring, I get my machine to let that in. I needed you. All the love, all the love, all the love you should have given. All the love, all the love, all the love.
She sounds so full of regret.
We wait
Wow. An interesting connection that I'm seeing here to Hounds of Love is that bass on the song that reappears on Watching You Without Me, I believe, which was sort of from the perspective of a ghost watching people go on with their lives without them. So in that way, Watching You Without Me is a more pessimistic counterpart to this song. Because on the song, we're seeing the results of Leave It Open. Kate has gone her whole life without being honest and without showing her true self and her eccentricities, and so she hasn't made real connections with people. On the first verse, her character dies surrounded by these friends who are caring for her, and she asks, why save all of this affection until now? And then on the pre-chorus, we get the answer when this sort of distant voice in the background says, we needed you to love us too, we wait for your move. So I guess the lesson is don't wait to be authentic and to let other people see your true self, because otherwise you'll never really connect with people, and I guess you'll die feeling unfulfilled and alone. To me, this brings to mind Pull Out the Pin and the way that this life or death situation brought out that soldier's zeal for life. And the sort of speculative exercise of this song in particular, I think tells us why Kate has chosen to write from the perspective of other characters. Basically, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, changing your perspective, and challenging your own subjective sense of truth can teach you things about yourself that otherwise you wouldn't have learned. Track number 9 is Houdini.
I wait at the table and hold hands with weak and strangers. The media roams and rambles, not taken in. I break the circle with a kiss. I pass the key with your spit still on my lip. You hit the water. Him and I in the room to prove you are with us too. He's using code that only you and I know. I catch the cues, watching you, hoping you do something wrong. Not even eternity can hold you dear. With your life, the only thing in my mind, pull you from the water.
Wow. So this song in particular had a nice combination of some of the album's most beautiful moments and strangest moments with her vocal delivery. Kate Bush is obviously an incredible vocalist, and part of what makes her such a great vocalist is that she is fearless with how she uses her voice, and she is not afraid to do things that don't immediately sound pleasing to the ear, but that convey emotion in just such an effective way. I just realized I think the album cover here is actually of Kate as Houdini's wife or lover, because the person she is embracing is wearing chains, which was one of Houdini's signature escape acts. And so in the song, Kate is at a seance trying to channel her late lover, who either she compares to Houdini or is Houdini. And it sounds like he actually comes through, which is unexpected because Kate opens the song sort of as a skeptic. She talks about this medium rambling and roaming and just sort of putting on a show, and she's not having it. And we actually find out why on the chorus when Kate talks about giving her lover this key to escape from his chains during an escape act by kissing him and giving him the key through his mouth. Houdini wasn't a wizard, he was an illusionist, so she understands how people can be tricked. And yet towards the end of the song, Houdini breaks through, or his ghost breaks through, and Kate says, not even eternity can hold Houdini. So on these last two songs, we have death not as an end, but as a threshold or as a new beginning. On All the Love, death was an opportunity to start again and do better, and here, of course, it's the portal to the afterlife. But what I think death as a metaphor is getting at is this idea of deconstructing and reconstructing your truth, whether it be your self-concept or your beliefs about mortality. So the catharsis of death lines up with the enlightenment of challenging what you believe to be true. Alright, the final track, track 10, is Get Out of My House. Okay. Oh my gosh. And that is how the album ends. Also, wow, it sounds like all of the most intense parts of Waking the Witch, but with that pulsating rhythm, it was just so unsettling. And so contrary to Kate's developing belief that she needs to open up and be honest and vulnerable, she is now shutting herself off. Because on the first verse, we have this unnamed person passing through the door, and so it's either like a breakup or another heartbreak like loss, but either way, it's compelling her to close herself off again to the world. And so Kate basically gets lost in the labyrinth of halls of her home and locks the doors and hunkers down and basically traps herself in her own prison of paranoia. This, of course, brings to mind Suspended in Gaffa, where she had a similar situation where this house that she was building was trapping her. Again, it's this house of her own creation. And that sends her backwards as a character. All of the work that she's done to open herself up more has been undone. Towards the end of the song, she says, I will not let you in. Don't you bring back the reveries. I turn into a bird, carry further than the word is heard. Even though she's the one being abandoned, effectively, she wants to turn into the runaway lover, just like the swallow from Night of the Swallow. She wants to fly away and disconnect from people. She doesn't want any more reveries or dreams, the way that she was connecting with other people by seeing life through their perspective. Just like her lover on Night of the Swallow, she's content to isolate herself. She also calls herself a mule, and of course mules are known for being stubborn, but also mules are infertile. So basically, this life where she is shutting herself off is infertile. It's not productive. So even as her character regresses, Kate the artist is telling us that this is wrong. So really, Kate is ending the album by suggesting to us that we need to push through our problems and be open about our own perspectives and open to other people's perspectives, because that's the only way that we can keep our spirits alive and free. Overall, this album was complex and challenging, and I really enjoyed it. I think between this album and Hounds of Love, I do still prefer Hounds of Love. It was more immediate to me, even though actually it took me a few listens really to get into Hounds of Love a few years ago when I listened to it for the first time, but this album is definitely less accessible in a lot of ways. Sonically, it's a little bit less concise and punchy and poppy, and Kate's vocals on this album really pushed the envelope. Even on the opener, her engaging her soprano was very out of left field. That said, I think some of the standouts here are the opener and closer because of how odd and chaotic they are. I think they'll grow on me even more with time. I think the more immediately accessible and fun songs are There Goes a Tenor and Suspended in Gaffa, and then to me the most emotional songs were Night of the Swallow, All the Love, and Houdini. I think the central device of this album of taking on different perspectives to learn more about herself was just ingenious. And I am so happy that I finally listened to this album. It is fantastic, so thank you to all of you who recommended that I listen to it, and let me know in the comments down below what music I should react to and what other topics you'd like to see me cover on my channel. Check the description for that donation link. Please subscribe to be here when I post new videos. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you are staying safe and healthy, and until next time, that's it.